The Hub's already looked at 10 theories that prove time travel exists, but if Bill and Ted can have both an excellent adventure and a bogus journey, why can't we? Stories of time slips and interdimensional portals have fascinated us since the dawn of recorded time. So hold on to your butts as we wind back the clock and look at wild space-time anomalies and top secret experiments of the past, present, and future. Let's do the time warp again! Whoa. The Philadelphia Experiment. In 1943, the USS Eldridge was subjected to mysterious experiments, the result of which were locked away in top-secret vaults. As a destroyer escort ship in the arsenal of the United States Navy, the Eldridge was used to test electromagnetic technology on July 22nd of that year. Electrified cables were wrapped around the outer hull of the vessel to see if it could be rendered invisible to Germany's magnetic mines. On October 28, 1943, the ship was subjected to another, more shocking experiment, involving teleportation and a momentary journey to the past. Stationed in the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, the Eldridge was reportedly sighted by the crew of the SS Andrew Forsyth just outside of the naval base of Norfolk, Virginia. For several seconds, the crew watched as the Eldridge and its seamen appeared in the waters before them, rocking in the current before it disappeared again. Sent back to its original Pennsylvania port, it still isn't hard to imagine that such a development in military technology would be kept as a tight-lipped secret, despite later crews of the Eldridge discounting this tale. Whether the stories of teleported sailors screaming aboard the decks of the Eldridge sound louder than the dissenting voices of skeptics is up to history to decide. The Kersey Case. In Lewis Carroll's classic fantasy, Alice fell through a rabbit hole and landed in Wonderland. In reality, magic rabbit holes just might exist. The strange case of 3 British naval cadets in 1957 shows some convincing evidence that time slips can occur at any moment, when we least expect them. William Lang, Michael Crowley, and Ray Baker found themselves exploring the tiny hamlet of Kersey on a day that seemed just like any other. But when they passed the first buildings in this town, they noticed a deep silence. Outside, there were no cars, streetlights, nor electrical wires in sight. Inside of the first building was a butcher shop, but no modern amenities were visible. No furniture, no tables, and the meat inside was green with age. Reconnecting 4 decades later, the men recalled their eerie experience and reached out to the head of the Society for Psychical Research. He believed they felt retrocognition, in which a person senses their surrounding as they appeared in the past. Research confirmed that the empty building had been a private residence at the time of their experience in 1957, but was a butcher shop in the 1790s. The lesson here is, if you get lost in Kersey, always make sure you can find a way out. Time-traveling Keanu Reeves. Meet the only guy from the 1800s who knows Kung Fu. Ever since the rise of the internet, a proven way to go viral is to find black and white photos of celebrity lookalikes. There are Civil War era pictures of Matthew McConaughey, Nicolas Cage, and John Travolta all over the World Wide Web, but the best old-timey doppelganger for a movie star might be this deep-thinking man from the 1800s and Keanu Reeves. Could Keanu Reeves be a time traveler? That's not outside the realm of possibility. Could he be a vampire? That's not entirely unbelievable either. Whatever your stance on the subject, there's a website dedicated to the immortal star, KeanuIsImmortal.com. But beyond the celebrity hubbub, a man named Von Helton took the conspiracy theory message boards by storm with his own claims. While movie stars can rely on Redditors to claim they're time travelers, Eugene Helton promoted himself as a real-life Marty McFly and provided photos of himself in different eras to prove it. He's a colorful character who also claims he's part vampire and served as inspiration for Marvel Comics' Punisher. Whether you believe him or not, it's definitely fun to entertain the idea that a blood-sucking veteran of the Civil War, World War I, and World War II cracked the code to the space-time continuum. Wormholes and black holes. Outside weird time slips, time travel could be achieved by traveling faster than the speed of light. Too bad we don't yet have a vehicle to travel that fast. On the other hand, we could create an environment to find a shortcut to the future or the past. Movies like Event Horizon or Sphere have capitalized on the idea that black holes could act as pathways to other dimensions. You would just have to make sure you flew into a black hole at the helm of a specially constructed protective mechanism, so you wouldn't get crushed by the intense pressure around you. Stephen Hawking argues that if you were to fly closely around a black hole at the speed of light for, say, 5 years, an observer outside of the range of the black hole would experience 10 years. While black holes are too far away from Earth to test this theory anytime soon, some researchers at NASA believe wormholes can be created artificially on our own planet to test their time travel capabilities. While these man-made wormholes would be too unstable for humans to pass through, particles could be used to see whether these stargates have the capacity to take us to faraway places and different timelines. The Moberly Jourdain Incident. Charlotte Ann Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain were two highly educated British citizens. Moberly served as residence hall principal, and Jourdain was her assistant at St. Hugh's College in Oxford. When they became the subjects of an extreme case of retrocognition, they were taken at their word. While on a visit to France's Palace of Versailles in 1901, Moberly and Jourdain were visited by odd guests. Cutting across the gardens to see the Petit Trianon, Marie Antoinette's private chateau, the two women encountered two palace gardeners wearing tri-corner hats and long frock coats who passed an old cottage toward a garden entryway, guarded by a man with a waxy face and evidence of smallpox on his cheeks. In fact, the entire scene had a waxy, lifeless, and dreamlike quality to it. When they came upon the Petit Trianon, a woman in an ornate dress and white bonnet sat on the grass, daydreaming. When they went inside, they congregated with guests dressed like them, and their surroundings returned to normal. Upon completing the tour, they returned outside to find some old landmarks missing. The creepy figures were gone, and the woman on the grass who resembled Marie Antoinette was nowhere to be found. Tipler's cylinder. A hypothetical idea based on the theory of relativity was brought up by American astronomer Frank Tipler. He suggested traveling around an infinitely long cylinder at super speeds could take you anywhere in the universe at any time in the past. The only problem is, it needs to be made of material 10 times the mass of our sun, condensed incredibly tight and rotated a couple billion times per minute. But if you actually flew around, say, a spinning paper towel roll made of titanium that went on forever, you could go back in time even billions of years. Your course would need to be plotted out carefully though. If you strayed too far from your central location on the cylinder, you could end up millions of light years away from your starting point. Although Stephen Hawking himself challenged the practicality of an infinite cylinder rotating into forever, Tipler argued that a similar effect could be achieved with one that had a fixed length. The only thing is, one needs to be built to prove this theory. If you end up creating your own Tipler cylinder at some point in the future, do Frank a favor, travel back to his time and tell him how it worked out. The time slip over Drem Airfield. Victor Goddard was a decorated pilot in Britain's Royal Air Force who experienced his fair share of the supernatural. In 1935, while flying over the abandoned base at Drem Airfield, he experienced one of the most well-known time slips in history. After the First World War and before the Second, Drem Airfield had fallen into disrepair. Runways were cracked, buildings were falling apart, and cows grazed in the fields. Then, a massive electrical storm descended on Goddard, and he was forced to maneuver through the dangerous clouds. When he pulled his biplane out of the treacherous weather, he saw Drem Airfield below him, only this time, it was different. Sunlight gleamed off 4 biplanes, which were similar to what he was flying, although these had coats of yellow paint. Mechanics in blue overalls ran between the vehicles below, which was odd to him because the standard RAF mechanic clothing was brown. And another plane he described was later found to be a monoplane, which hadn't been around yet. The entire description of the airfield matched how it would later look in 1939 during the Second World War. It was as if Goddard received a warning of the battles to come. The Hutton-Brandt Premonition. Stories of otherworldly predictions and strange premonitions populate many tales of the Second World War, much like the experience of Victor J. Goddard, J. Bernard Hutton, and Joachim Brandt, who saw a glimpse of the future during a routine assignment. As an associate reporter and a photographer for a German publication, the two men were shown around Hamburg-Altona shipyards as part of a story on the site in 1932. Mind you, the war didn't start for another 7 years, which is why the two men thought a test drill was going on when bombs started dropping around them and black fiery smoke engulfed the sky. Being the professional journalists they were, they snapped photos as they ran to their car and sped away from the hellfire. Looking back at the base behind them, however, there were no signs of any air raid. When their photos were developed, the base looked exactly as it did before the attack. All the aircraft and supplies remained intact, and there were no signs of any attack. The shipyard was later destroyed in an attack by the British Royal Air Force in 1943, ruined in much the same way Hutton and Brandt described during their 1932 time slip. The Montauk Project. Montauk Point, on the eastern tip of Long Island, is a beautiful getaway, with waves crashing along rocky beaches and a signature lighthouse towering over the picturesque scene. It's also host to the Camp Hero military installation, a base with a history so creepy it served as inspiration for the Netflix hit Stranger Things. The story goes that Camp Hero tests relied on several children with special cognitive abilities. Their bodies were hooked up to electromagnetic devices and used to harness unimaginable abilities, such as controlling people's thoughts, connecting to other people's minds, and looking through their eyes and opening up portals to different times and places. In one of the more famous instances in 1983, the Montauk Boys were used to connect to the USS Eldridge, involved in the Philadelphia experiment from 1943. During this time, 2 soldiers, Ed and Duncan Cameron, were brought into the future and told to destroy the material on the Eldridge in 1943. It sounds like far-fetched science fiction, but with tons of government resources poured into top-secret projects like the one in Montauk, there's a lot we don't know about what goes on behind these closed steel doors. Project Pegasus. Alleged to be paid for under DARPA, the United States Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the secret tests of Project Pegasus were first divulged to the public in 2004. It was during this time that the colorful claims of Andrew D. Basiago, an attorney based out of Washington State, first came to light. Based on work by famed inventor Nikola Tesla, Basiago says he underwent tests as a child that were similar to those experienced by the Montauk boys. Using radial energy discovered by Tesla, Basiago states that he was teleported into different points in space-time on missions for the U.S. Department of Defense. Sent back to the site of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address in 1863, his disguise as a Union bugle boy had such large shoes that it forced him to attract unwanted attention. He left the dais area so as not to appear suspicious, and according to him, he can be seen in the crowd of photographer Josephine Cogg's pictures of the event. He was also sent back to the Lincoln assassination in Ford's Theater, and he believes that each occasion was slightly different. Whether you believe in this far-fetched tale or not, it's fascinating to consider the concrete past being as subject to change as our future. Thanks for watching the Hub's 10 theories that prove time travel exists. We'll see you around next time, or the time after that, or the time before that, depending on what time you come from.